Okay, welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I have an incredible guest today who is so like me. Her name is Shannon Talbot. She is also Canadian. She is also an author, and she's also a speaker and coach. And so, already just from that, you know that I love her. I recently received her book, started reading it, could not put it down. Every couple pages, I'm just like, well, yeah, oh my gosh, yes, perfect. Exactly. These are my thoughts as I go through. It's just so bang on to, I think, what is really relevant to helping working professionals live happier and healthier lives. And that's what Shannon's all about. She's got an MBA. She's been featured on CBC Radio, Today's Parent, Chatelaine, LifeHack, Thrive Global, all the places. As I mentioned, she's Canadian. She lives in Toronto with her husband, her two sons, and a dog. And her book is called Breaking Free, Your Guide to Creating the Career of Your Life and Dreams. So I want to dive into this today, having also published my book. Again, so many things in common, but welcome to the show, Shannon.
Thanks, Jill. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. I can imagine you're on this sort of like whirlwind of talking about the book right now because it's just come out and it's so exciting. I'm really curious to know what was your favorite part of this whole process of like writing a book from, it can be so wild in the beginning as we're doing the work. And then it's like we have to release it and let it be. And then we have to promote it again. Like, how's your journey been?
It's been actually really awesome, like better than I expected. I always pictured writing a book would be so draining and long. And yes, there were long days, especially in the editing stage. It was grueling. But for the most part, I really enjoyed it. And it was fun rehashing all the stories. Some were sad, but it brought up a lot of emotions. And it was a really fun trip down memory lane.
Well, and you can really get that as the reader too, going through and reading these stories. They're so authentic and they're so touching. Like, you really bring us into your world and give us real examples of how we can take the knowledge and apply it in our own lives. And a lot of this comes from your background, like in corporate, right? That's where you started your career.
Yeah, I worked for 15 years in banking
Wow.
and then 2 years in advertising.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
long time.
And so
Great time.
completely.
It was a great time, great experience. But I planned to leave corporate 10 years before I did.
Oh,
It took me
wow.
that long to leave.
And why do you think that is? Like, I'm curious. It's such a big move, you know?
Yeah. You know what I think it is? And sorry, not necessarily to leave corporate. I planned to leave banking. So I did my MBA 2008, 2009 with the plan. I'm like, I'm going to leave banking and I'm going to try a new industry. The recession hit in 2009 when I graduated. So 2008, 2009. So that did put my plans on hold. But then my husband and I were trying to start a family and we went through fertility and then we ended up adopting our boys. But that took, the trying to create a family took about 4 years. And then when you're a parent, your priorities change, right? So it's like, okay, my career is not number one anymore. I got these little kids at home. I got mouths to feed. Stability is good. And then we get comfortable. So I think in my case, it was just, you're going through the motions and I switched companies in there. I switched different jobs and things like that. I moved up, but it was the idea of going somewhere new is daunting, right? And then all your fears come up and you tell yourself all these reasons why you shouldn't. And then there I was.
Yeah. And I can totally relate to that because I mean, again, so many similarities. I also had like 4 years of fertility stuff before my
Mm.
kids came, and we both have a special needs kid. And so and everyone's story is so different, but everyone has their own version of this story where their lives changed when they became a mom and in the home. Now they have different responsibilities. But so many of us are still like, whether they want to be following your path and really just shattering the status quo and trying something completely different, or whether they want to just continue to chug away and succeed in the industry or their job or career they're in. How do we, I mean, loaded question, but how do we balance all of that? Like that's the big question I think we all want to know.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is don't put all of your don't put all of your priorities on the back burner,
Yeah.
right? Like at the end of the day, our kids are happy when we're happy.
Mm.
They know if we're miserable. And like, who wants their kid growing up to see, oh, mom hated her job. Oh, I guess I'm going to hate my job. Right. Like, our kids are always watching us. So I think the biggest thing is, find those ways. Maybe switching jobs, careers isn't possible. That's okay. But find those ways to bring more joy and more excitement into your life, whether that's hobbies, whether it's volunteering, whether it's just learning. In my case, I really had to learn to manage my stress and anxiety as my kid gave me a goal to be less angry. That's when it hit home for me. So even that alone, I started a morning routine, and even that alone changed me
Mhm.
so much that I was able to be a much more calm and patient person all around, which made me a better leader in the workplace and then a better mom and wife at home.
Can you share with us some of the things that you do as part of your morning routine or part of your like daily practice that keep you grounded and sane and
Yes.
showing up as your best self?
Yes. So I'll let everyone know. I was one of these people who never exercised. It went on my New Year's resolutions every year and it failed every year. I wasn't good. I didn't do any of the good stuff. None of it. Um, so in my late 30s, I read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And it's funny because, of course, it's about feeling healthier and happier and stuff. But I read it for all you moms out there. I read it as, ooh, you get an hour without any interruptions. And that's how I got hooked because I was like, you know what? Just an hour of peace.
Yeah.
That's what I want most in my life. So I started out doing it as described in the book, which is 20 minutes of working out, 20 minutes of mindfulness, and 20 minutes of learning. So I would read. But that didn't work for me. I don't love working out. And I also am a person who needs their coffee in the morning. So I switched it up because I was like, 20 minutes to get up and go on my elliptical in the dark, cold basement is not enticing. I'm going to press snooze. So I switched it. So I get up at 5, now a little bit later, depending on the day, but between 5 and 6 a.m., I get up. I go and I meditate for 10 minutes. Then I go make a coffee. I practice gratitude. I do some journaling. I write out my 10 dreams I have that I want to accomplish from 10 years out. And then I do reading, or I might do an online course or something like that. Some way of growth.
Yeah, I love that you tweaked it for what works for you. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I want people to hear is you can listen to all of the gurus, read all of the books and get the framework that worked for them that you know, you don't have to use it as the end all and be all. You have the freedom basically, right? To use it as inspiration and figure out what works for you. Because for me, same thing. I wanted a morning routine so bad when I was learning to do personal development, getting into the journey, but my kids already wake up at 5 or before. So I was like, what am I gonna do, right? Like I can't possibly. And my kids are so sneaky. Like if I'm awake, they'll know, and they'll
Right.
wake up at 4 with me. I'm like, no, 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 no. So I ended up doing an evening routine, and I felt like that for me worked just as well. And I still got to do all those things that fed me and filled my cup and allowed me to grow and follow my dreams and take that time. But it doesn't always have to look the same, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what works for you exactly. I love that. It can be evening, it could be a lunchtime routine.
Yeah.
It's not when or the exact steps you take, it's the how you do it and consistency and, continuing to do it and tweaking it until it is something you look more forward to.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you said that because something that, like, if you start your morning routine or your routine in some way now, today, and you go through and you find that your gratitude practices or your journaling or whatever is such a big piece of it in the beginning, and you move away from that and bring something else in a little bit later, that doesn't mean that um it doesn't mean anything bad. You haven't failed with your gratitude practice. You're growing and learning, and your routine should too, right?
Yeah.
So
And we have to stop striving for perfection, right? It doesn't mean doing it every day. If you don't do it a day, if you skip a day, it's okay. Cut yourself some slack. I think sometimes the guilt we put on ourselves is worse than anything else,
yeah.
right? So if you skip a day, if you only do it a couple times a week, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I would say, like, 10 minutes on the elliptical is like 500 times better than 0 minutes.
Yes, love that.
Every time is better. And I love that you were inspired by the stories and people that you knew who were successful women going for their dreams, doing the things. Like, how cool is that that you were able to have these like models to look up to, right? It's so awesome.
Yeah, like the one in it, I include the story of Stacey Mowbray, who used to be the CEO of Second Cup. She went on to be president for all of the Americas for Weight Watchers, like phenomenal success, sits on all these boards. Most humble person I've ever met. But I heard her speak in 2008, and that was the first time in my corporate career I ever heard a mom talk about how hard it is to want to rise the ranks in the business world and to have young kids at home. And you want to be a good wife, you want to be a good mom, you want to be a good leader. And she shared her struggles. And that was the first time where I'm like, wow.
Right.
And I didn't even have kids yet. And I was but I was so touched by her story and her vulnerability that when I was writing this book, she was one of the first people I reached out to. Funny because I don't have a podcast. I'm not used to interviewing people, but she was one of my first interviews. I'm like, should have saved her for the end. But it was so amazing. She didn't know who I was, reached out, she agreed to do the interview. And her story was even better, like to get the second part of her story, talking about imposter syndrome, talking about how she had to overcome that. So being able to include her story in my book was really special. But then I also wanted to make sure I wasn't only including CEOs, right? Because a lot of us don't strive to be there. We strive to, do whatever role we want to do, but still be good at it and still manage our kids and be a good mom and all of that. So I made sure I also included people from all different levels and even a few different industries too.
Yeah, which is fantastic because it shows the universal sort of truth that we all face similar challenges. We all have similar dreams. They look different for each of us, but we're all in it together. And the more that we can speak that and talk to it and show others like authentically how what the challenges are that we're dealing with, but also how we move forward, I think that just helps. It's like reaching back and extending your hand for the next woman coming up, right?
Yeah,
So valuable.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing I love that you talk about that I also talk a lot about is boundaries.
Mm.
I'm wondering, like, what was your experience when you first started trying to implement boundaries? Because I know for me, it was like I swung really far in the pendulum and got like way too boundaried and I had to make my way back. What was your experience like?
So I probably fluctuated with boundaries my whole career. I'd be good at it at some points and then I'd be horrible at it at other points. And I think it's going to sound really awful, but the best I was at boundaries was when I knew I was leaving the corporate world and I didn't have the fear of losing my job anymore. I'd started my business on the side. And so I knew that I was only going to be in this role for another 6 to 8 months, I'd planned. And the interesting thing is, that is when I really stuck to my boundaries. That is when I showed up more authentically. And that is when I shone and I got picked as one of the top 3 leaders of the company because I didn't have the fear. I didn't care so much about what other people thought of me.
Mhm.
So when we can shed those fears and those worries, that is sometimes when we can be our best
I
and
love
and
that.
just shine.
Yeah, just show up authentically and be in the role we're in without, like you said, fear and worry. Those are two, and guilt, right?
And
You
guilt,
said that. Oh
yes.
my God, mom guilt, work guilt, it's all real. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic, and congratulations because you've had so many amazing accomplishments in your life. I can't wait to see what else, next year when I'm reflecting back on this to see how far you've taken this. I know that you're a speaker also. What's your favorite thing to speak about when you're in front of audiences? Like, what do you love to share about?
You know what? I'm on a high right now because this morning, actually this afternoon, I just went and spoke to a group downtown Toronto on morning routines.
Oh, cool.
So it was a group in corporate, they're leaders. They do these wellness summits a few times a year, and they had me come in and talk about morning routines. And it was so fun. And I just love it. I also talked about other, strategies we can do for well-being in the workplace and things like that. But we had a really great discussion going about different morning routines, what that looks like, and just the benefits we can have from them. So that to me is really exciting. And then my next favorite topic would be, talking to women about breaking free and living the life they want to live and stop holding themselves back.
Yeah. What is that breaking free? I know that's the title of your book. What does that really mean to you? Like if you had to just describe it in the way that feels so true to you, what does that breaking
Mm.
free really mean?
Being your true self. And I know that sounds cliche sometimes, but it really is. It's showing up as who you are and letting go of any other people's expectations or, just letting it all go, concerns about what others think, the fears, the excuses, the BS we tell ourselves, just being who you want to be
Mhm.
and breaking free from all the other things or the norms society tells us we should be. That's a big part of my book too, is with each title I got, I put on myself, I did it to myself. I put my own expectations on of how I should be in that role. And so it's breaking free of that. It's breaking free of how you think you should act and just being how you want to be.
I love it. That is so it's such valuable wisdom for anybody, even if they're not in corporate world, right? Even if they're taking time and they're home with their babies or they're an entrepreneur or they volunteer their time or whatever it is. It can be, the retired grandma, whoever it is who's listening, like you can still be everything that you want to be if you learn these tools and these tricks to sort of shed those comparisons and those worries about what other people are thinking about you. And one of the big ones, and I struggle with this a lot, and I like to talk about this, is imposter syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit, like Cole's Notes, what is imposter syndrome and how does it show up for people?
So imposter syndrome is really when you're stepping into a role or you're doing something and you feel like you're a fraud. You feel like you do not deserve to be there and basically people are going to figure you out. So it's in essence it's not having strong confidence is an easier way of putting it. But here's the thing. When we step into a new role, we're going to take time to figure it out. We're going to make mistakes. We're not expected to be up to speed day one, but yet we tell ourselves we should be. And we put these insane expectations and this insane pressure on ourselves. And then, feel like any moment now, they're going to figure me out. I'm going to get fired. They're going to realize they should take the promotion away from me or the bonus away from me. And it's just all of those negative thoughts that go through our head.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
the
sorry, I
not
forget your second point, your second
oh,
question on that.
me too. That's okay. I forget all the time. I'm like, I'm just gonna fire them and we'll see if we get there. But I wanna get your opinion, and mostly just selfishly, but for any of the other entrepreneurs out there, because I recently
Mhm.
quit my job and
Congratulations.
thank you. It's super recent. And I'm transitioning into this full-time entrepreneurship. And I'm really taking to heart that those words that you said about not expecting ourselves to be perfect day one, right? That can be in anything, but working for yourself, I think, is especially difficult because you are the boss and the employee, right? You're the one setting the tone and the strategy, but you're also the one doing the work. And so I think for anyone in that position, whether it's like a side hustle, a passion project, a small business, a solo business, if they're a contractor or an MLM or whatever your job is, if you're responsible, giving yourself a little bit of breathing room and a break as you transition, especially as you transition from that 9 to 5 role, can be so big.
Exactly. And treat it, look at how you're talking to yourself as if you're talking to a friend
Mm,
or situation. And
yeah.
sometimes, actually an exercise I do with my clients sometimes is I'll have them write down all the negative thoughts they have, and then I have them pretend they're saying them to their kid or
Oh,
grandkid or best friend or parent. And I'll actually say, okay, say them out loud and pretend you're talking to your 12-year-old daughter. And they're like, "No, no, I can't. What? I would never say these things to my 12-year-old daughter." I'm like, "I know. We wouldn't. Be child abuse, verbal abuse, really." But that is how we treat ourselves so often. And yes, we're not going to strive for perfection. We can't be kind, like, be great if we could be kind to ourselves all the time. But the more we can catch ourselves, saying those negative things to ourselves and start to reframe them a little bit or be kinder to ourselves, we'll just be able to feel better and happier and build up our confidence a little bit more as well.
And I love that you bring that into the, like, if you were to say it to your kids, and it makes me wonder, are there ways that, or maybe this is something you've explored and maybe you haven't, but are there ways that we can use this knowledge to help our kids as they're like in their formative years so that they don't have to go through the BS that we go through with imposter syndrome and lack of boundaries and all of that? Like, how do we help our kids with that?
Well, I think the first thing, so a lesson I learned. So my oldest, as we talked about special needs, my oldest has autism, ADHD, and anxiety. And during COVID, we had therapy for him. And we had this day where he got embarrassed. And, anyways, I was talking to the therapist, and she goes, "What did you say to him when he got embarrassed?" I said, "Don't be embarrassed." And she went, "No, he's allowed to be embarrassed." Validate, like, "Oh, yeah, I can understand why you'd be embarrassed." Right? So often we want to make things better for our kids. So we'll try and fix things, but the first step, and it makes so much sense, but I had to hear it from a professional, but it makes so much sense, is validating their feelings, right? They're allowed to feel whatever they want to feel. So letting them know, yeah, it's okay you're feeling. We're not saying necessarily we agree with it, but just, yeah, it's okay you're feeling that way. And then, how about if said this instead or told yourself this instead, right? It's the reframing, although my kids totally catch on now and they're like, "I know what you're trying to do here," and they don't buy it. So it's really hard. But the more we can, and it works for people too, right? Like, we don't always just want people to give us advice. You don't want somebody to sit down and tell you exactly what to do. And kids especially don't want that. So we have to ask the right questions in a way that helps them discover the answers or what they should be doing. And it's tricky, but there is a way to do it so that, we're just asking and just test them out, test out different questions and have them form the answers.
Yeah. It all is so much more powerful when it comes from within, right?
Yeah.
With guidance, but we can that's why I love books like yours because they give us the guidance, they give us the framework, they give us the tools so that
Mhm.
we can do it ourselves, so that it's a resource for us to go to without feeling like someone's telling us what to do um or we're being like, I don't know, scolded or motivated or whatever you sometimes need, right? Because
Yeah.
it can come from all motivations, but I love having a resource like this that is friendly and relatable and wise and just so inspiring. So kudos to you. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah. Thank you. And I love that hearing you say that because that was my vision too. I wanted it to be practical exercises that anybody can do. But we learn through storytelling. And so I also wanted to include a lot of stories because not everyone wants to do exercises, but they might learn some things or learn, new things they didn't know or how to overcome something or just feel not so alone, right? Hearing a story of somebody else going through a similar thing. So that was the idea, was part storytelling and then part how to.
Nailed it. What's your favorite part of the book?
It's so random. It has nothing to do with my career or anything. The part that still makes me laugh is that in Ottawa, because I know you're based in Ottawa, I went to Carleton and I went up and knocked on a Canadian rock band's tour bus after their concert at Carleton and asked them to party with me and my friends. And it still makes me laugh. I'm like, who was I back then to do? So that's what I mean. I went through stages where I was really authentic, really fearless, and then it would, I'd pull it back. But that part makes me laugh. But no, you know what? I, I think the stories in general, some of them are sad, some of them are hard. I shared one story about my childhood that even some of my friends didn't know. Um, But it also felt good sharing it too and kind of getting open and having the conversation with my parents and brothers now to get their permission to include it. So I would say just the stories in general are my favorite part.
Yeah, That's wonderful. It's such a therapeutic thing to write a book that's sort of also centered around your experience, right? And to be able to teach it and put it all together in this caring, loving package that you can deliver to someone. It's sort of like a little love casserole. Like, here you go. Here's everything in my
I
book,
like that.
you know?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's fantastic. I know we will absolutely link everything in the show notes so that listeners can go and grab the book. It's available anywhere books are sold, right? And how can they, if they're interested in coaching or learning more from you, connecting with you directly, where do you like to hang out online? How can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So they can go to my website is shannontalbot.com. I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Shannon Talbot, or Instagram as well, Shannon Talbot _coaching.
Perfect. And your website is beautiful. We'll make sure we link that there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. I always like to ask, is there any last piece of advice or anything that we haven't touched on that you want to share before we close up?
To say if you have a dream or a goal you want to go, you have in the back of your mind or you've had in your hearts for a while, just make now your time and go do it. And I will be cheering you on all the way.
That feels so validating. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you.